The taste of betrayal is sharper than any pain I've known, like biting down on a copper penny. I stood at the back of the conference room, heart pounding, fists clenched, watching the man who used to be my mentor, now my thief, bask in the glow of flashing cameras and thunderous applause. He stood beneath the Health Tech Systems banner, with all the elegance his expensive suit and silver hair could lend him. Miles Brandon, CEO of one of Austin's most promising startups, held up the microchip I'd spent 2 years of my life building. This technology, he said into the microphone, is going to change how we detect disease. Non-invasive, real-time, reliable diagnostics. A future where a single touch can save lives. The crowd roared. My chest tightened. Just yesterday, I had shown him the prototype. In my office. Privately. I'd walked him through the neural pathways, the diagnostic algorithm, the unique sensor coding that responded to cellular anomalies through skin contact. He'd nodded, asked questions, even seemed impressed. But he never once said he'd present it today, or call it his. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and went to the company website. There it was, new breakthrough from health tech, the Brandon diagnostic chip. I felt like I'd been gutted. He looked at me from the stage, not with guilt, not with shame, but with a smile. That slight, calculated smirk that said, I win, and you can't do a thing about it. I left before the applause faded. Outside, the heat of the Austin afternoon clung to my skin like guilt, but the fire in my chest had already started to burn. He thought I was done. He thought I'd stay quiet. He had no idea what I was capable of. The next morning, I was sitting across from Miles in his glass-walled office on the 20th floor, overlooking downtown Austin. That ridiculous panoramic view meant to make subordinates feel small. I didn't sit. I wasn't here to negotiate. You stole my work. I said it plainly. No yelling. No theatrics. Just truth. Miles didn't even blink. He folded his hands like a pastor giving last rites. David, he said, tone syrupy with condescension. You built that chip while on Health Tech's payroll. It belongs to the company. He slid a folder across the table. I didn't have to open it. I already knew what it was. Severance package. NDA. A bribe, wrapped in legal language and flattery. 6 months' pay, full benefits, and a letter of recommendation, he said, as if he were doing me a favor. I'd suggest you take it. Move on. Start fresh. After you bury my name and take the credit. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Let's not make this personal. I almost laughed. He made it personal the moment he walked onto that stage with my invention in his hand. I opened the folder slowly. The word confidential stared back at me like a muzzle from my mouth. I closed it without signing and slid it back across the desk. You'll regret this, I said. He chuckled, smug and sure of himself. What exactly do you think you can do? I didn't answer, just walked out and left his office smelling of arrogance and betrayal. Back in my apartment, a small, cluttered one-bedroom just off East 6th, I paced like a trapped animal. The access codes to my company email were revoked. My internal messages had vanished. When I called IT to retrieve my files, they said I was no longer on the system. They had erased me, but they missed something. One thing. I slid open the bottom drawer of my desk, reached behind a stack of old textbooks, and pulled out a small, black external hard drive duct-taped underneath. My backup. My insurance policy. Every schematic, every test result, every video of me developing the chip. Saved there, time-stamped, untouched. I plugged it into my personal laptop. It booted up instantly. There I was, on camera. Just 3 months ago, glasses foggy from exhaustion, explaining to the webcam. The chip detects biochemical anomalies at the dermal level, flags abnormalities in real time. This build version includes the first stage self-learning algorithm. I watch myself work, pause, then grin tiredly into the lens. My voice cracked a little, but my pride was unmistakable. I built this. Not Miles. Not his board. Me. And then the email came. It was from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line, no sender name. Just 5 chilling words in the message body. They're watching. Delete everything now. My stomach turned. I yanked the hard drive out and stuffed it into my backpack. Just as I zipped it shut, the front door exploded inward with a crack like thunder. I dove into my hallway closet, barely pulling the door closed before two shadows entered. They didn't speak at first, just moved with military precision. They didn't check drawers for cash. They didn't touch my TV or my wallet. They went straight for my laptop, then my router, then the fireproof box where I kept old tax records. One of them hissed. He said it's here somewhere. Backup drive. Check the vents. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. I clutched the hard drive to my chest. They flipped my mattress, tore my closet apart, just not the one I was hiding in. Maybe luck, maybe grace. Eventually, they left. When the silence returned, I emerged to find my apartment in ruin. I dialed 911, but the officer who showed up looked like he'd walked out of central casting. Polished, rehearsed, indifferent. Probably just random thieves, he said, handing me a card. File a report online. But the name on the card, Officer Jenkins, didn't exist when I checked later. No such badge number. No report filed. It was a message. Miles had reach. He had lawyers, friends in local government, maybe even law enforcement on his payroll. He wanted me scared, disarmed, forgotten. But that's not who I am. I wiped my old laptop and bought a new one, used off Craigslist, paid for in cash. I encrypted every file, uploaded a duplicate set to a hidden server I called Echo Vault, and stored the original drive in a hollowed-out copy of The Art of War on my bookshelf. Let them come. Because Miles had no idea that every chip they were producing, every single one, carried a fail-safe. A line of code I embedded during the firmware stage. Harmless at first, but if not authenticated every 30 days using my personal cryptographic key, the whole system would go dark. Not crash, not malfunction. Shut down. Silent. Permanent. And the first batch? It had shipped last week. I checked the countdown timer I'd coded into the admin interface. 17 days. 17 days until every unit in circulation blinked into uselessness. I could stop it, but first I wanted Miles to sweat. And when he realized what was happening, when the headlines turned, when the money bled, and his empire began to tremble, then I'd decide what came next. The city of Austin buzzed with its usual noise. Coffee shops filled with laptop warriors, scooters cluttering sidewalks, the ever-present hum of ambition in the air. But beneath that noise, I had gone quiet, focused, underground. I live now in a cheap roadside motel on the outskirts, one of those places that still use brass keys instead of digital cards. I paid cash every 3 nights. No ID, no digital footprint. The guy at the front desk didn't care who I was, and that was the point. From my corner unit, I ran the war. The failsafe was brilliant, if I may say so myself. A cryptographic dead man's switch buried so deep in the chip's operating system that even health tech's best engineers wouldn't know what to look for. Every chip required a unique handshake protocol, a string of numbers and biometric encryption only I could provide. Miss a 30-day renewal window? Boom. Brick. I checked the countdown again. 15 days. Tick-tock. Miles had gone on a full-blown media blitz since the unveiling. Health tech was being hailed as the next Tesla of healthcare. CNBC ran a segment calling him a visionary. The Wall Street Journal featured the chip on the cover of its tech issue. The future of non-invasive diagnostics is here. And there he was, smiling. Every time I saw his smug face on screen, a new fire lit in my chest. But something deeper than revenge had taken root in me. I didn't just want justice. I wanted clarity. I wanted the truth to matter again, not just for me, but for the industry. Because if he could get away with this, he wouldn't be the last. So I started building Phoenix Protocol. Not a weapon, a symbol. It began with a cloud drive titled P49, Proof. Inside, I uploaded my lab videos, annotated test logs, email threads, and firmware source code. All time-stamped, all irrefutable. I created a secondary account, anonymous, impossible to trace, and began to assemble the next stage, the release. But I needed an edge, a moment, something so perfectly timed it couldn't be ignored. Then like clockwork it came. A banner ad popped up while I was scrolling through Reddit. Health Tech was holding a live-streamed medical demonstration in New York. A doctor would show the world how the chip could detect biomarkers with a touch. It was meant to be the company's next giant PR win. I stared at the screen. Day 31. It was too perfect. I stayed up all night preparing. The morning of the event, I sat in a coffee shop in South Austin, a hoodie pulled over my head, laptop open, sipping the most bitter black coffee I could stomach. The live stream started. A clean-cut doctor smiled for the camera. "Let's check for inflammatory markers," he said, placing the device on a volunteer's arm. Nothing. He frowned, tapped the screen. Still nothing. He tried another device. And another. Confusion turned to concern. Across the globe, similar reports rolled in. From Tokyo to Toronto, hospitals were reporting technical difficulties with health tech as chips. Engineers scrambled. PR went silent. Then a leak started. Not mine yet. One of their vendors posted on Twitter, "All HealthSkin devices suddenly stopped working. Anyone else seeing this?" Hashtag chip fail. I took a long sip of coffee, opened my private account, and posted my first official message under the alias Phoenix49. Authenticity is everything. P49. I didn't attach any proof yet. Just a whisper, a warning, a spark. Within hours, "Who is Phoenix49?" trended across Twitter. Reddit lit up with conspiracy theories. Tech bloggers began reaching out to their sources. The vacuum miles created by erasing me was now pulling him into the abyss. I watched the panic spread, not with glee, but with purpose. My hands didn't tremble. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Then the phone rang. A burner line I hadn't used in weeks. I didn't recognize the number. Against my better judgment, I answered. A voice, cold, professional. "We know it's you, David." I stayed silent. "Mr. Brandon is prepared to be generous if this stops now." I almost laughed. "And if it doesn't?" There was a pause. "Then we'll make you disappear. Permanently." The line went dead. For a moment, silence hung in the room like fog. Then I stood up, walked over to the window, and stared out at the horizon. The Texas sun was setting, casting the whole sky in hues of orange and gold. Let them come. I opened my laptop again, posted a second message. "Truth fears no threats. More tomorrow. P49. And with that, the real game began. "You shouldn't be here," Noah whispered across the Formica table, glancing nervously toward the greasy windows of the late-night diner on Congress Avenue. We were seated in the back booth. The kind waitresses pretended not to notice. Noah had once been health tech's brightest systems engineer, a quiet genius who saw patterns where others saw code. He was also the only colleague who ever stood up for me. He lost his job a week after I was fired. I stirred my cold coffee. "I need intel. What's happening inside?" Noah leaned in, his face gaunt from lack of sleep. "It's chaos. The chip failure caught them off guard. Miles is losing it, screaming in board meetings, threatening layoffs. But the tech team has no clue what's causing the shutdowns. They won't find it," I said quietly. "It's buried too deep." Noah nodded, his eyes flickering with something like admiration and fear. "You did this." I didn't answer. Instead, I asked, "How did they move so fast to wipe me out? The NDAs, the security lockdown, the press narrative?" His jaw tightened. "Because they've done it before." The air went still. 3 years ago, he said, a developer named Eliza Chong built the neural architecture that became the company's first breakthrough product. She challenged Miles in a meeting after seeing her name scrubbed from the patent. The next day, she was gone. Official story said she had a breakdown. I found her last month working at a Valero gas station in San Marcos. Nobody believed her story. I felt cold, like I'd touched something dead. "How many others?" Noah shrugged. "Enough. You're just the first to fight back." My burner phone buzzed. I glanced down, a text from Ava, another former coworker. I hadn't heard from her since the day I was escorted out of the building. "David, I'm so sorry. I never thought it would go this far. He promised I'd lead the project if I helped him get access to your files. I didn't know he'd erase you. Please forgive me." My gut twisted. Ava had been my closest collaborator. Late nights. Shared coffee. The only person besides Noah I'd ever trusted with root access to my development server. We had built that chip together, or so I thought. I replied, "Did he promise you that before or after you gave him the encryption keys?" She answered instantly, "Please, if this comes out, I lose everything. I just wanted a shot. I never meant for this to happen." My fingers hovered over the screen. Then something in me shifted. The old David would have let it go, rationalized the betrayal, told himself people were desperate. But that version of me didn't survive Miles Brandon. I typed one final reply. You should have thought of that before you sold me out. Enjoy the spotlight while it lasts. I added her name to a growing file labeled collaborators. I would expose every single one of them, not out of vengeance, but out of justice. The rot inside health tech wasn't an accident. It was a system, built by design, and I had every intention of dismantling it. That night, I received a message through my encrypted Proton account. It was unsigned. No subject, no name, just a digital breadcrumb, a Dropbox link labeled, "For the Truth." I clicked it. Inside were dozens of files. Voice memos, calendar entries, email chains, each one more damning than the last. Miles speaking candidly about repurposing staff ideas. Notes on how to reword patents to bury the original authors. An audio recording of a private board meeting where he referred to me as a disposable tool. The sender? Tracy Wu, his executive assistant. 5 years of working right beside him. She had been watching all along. The next morning, we met in a dark corner of Zilker Park. She wore a long gray coat and sunglasses. Still polished. Still guarded. Why now? I asked. She hesitated. Because you're fighting back. And because I'm tired of helping him win. I studied her. Why should I trust you? Because I could have leaked this to the press myself. But I didn't. You're already outside the system. You've got nothing left to lose. Me? I've still got a career, at least until this goes public. She handed me a flash drive. This contains his deepest secrets, she said. But be careful. He's scared now. And when Miles gets scared, people get hurt. She turned to walk away, then paused. End him, and do it right. By the time I returned to my motel, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I opened my laptop, connected the flash drive, merged its contents with my own Phoenix archive. I began scripting the next move, timed perfectly to derail a major investor call scheduled for that Thursday. Emails, audio clips, timestamp conversations. Proof of Miles's theft. Proof of Ava's betrayal. And the beginnings of a pattern of suppression, intimidation, and cover-up. This wouldn't be another anonymous leak. It would be a reckoning. Thursday arrived with a kind of stillness that felt artificial, like the pause before a storm. I had tracked the time zone of every scheduled attendee on Health Tech's investor call. New York hedge fund managers, Silicon Valley venture capitalists, pension fund reps from Chicago, all invited to hear Miles Brandon spin another golden tale. I knew he'd be confident, maybe even smug again, painting the chip failure as a temporary technical hiccup or a minor firmware delay due to unexpected demand. He was good at spinning narratives, but I was better at truth. At exactly 9:50 a.m. Central Time, 10 minutes before the call was set to begin, I uploaded the first package from a secure IP rerouted through 3 countries. The Dropbox link appeared in inboxes that mattered most. Key investors, tech journalists, whistleblower protection forums, and every health tech employee I could identify from the company directory I had downloaded months ago. The message was short. No accusations. No drama. Subject, health scan origins. Internal communications log, confidential. Body, for those who seek truth, not branding. P49. Then I shut my laptop and waited. It didn't take long. I was watching Bloomberg's tech segment when the anchor's voice caught, mid-sentence, as she received a producer note in her ear. Her brow furrowed. "We're just getting word of a developing situation out of Austin," she said, blinking at the camera. Leaked documents appeared to show internal communications from health tech systems contradicting their official narrative on the development of the health scan chip. I knew what they were seeing. The carefully compiled email threads, each one time-stamped and authenticated. There was Miles responding directly to my schematic diagrams with comments like, "David, this is game-changing. We need to frame this as a full departmental effort, but your contribution is at the core." There were internal discussions about patent filings where my name was removed before submission. One message from Ava practically confessed her role, saying, "I gave him the drive this morning. He's already prepping for press. I feel awful, but I need this promotion." And most damning of all, A calendar invite from Miles titled Board Strategy Meeting, Health Scan IP Realignment. The note beneath it read, Objective, consolidate credit under Brandon to enhance public trust and executive visibility. There's no spin for that. By 10:05 a.m., Health Tech's investor call was canceled without explanation. Stock tickers started bleeding red. Twitter caught fire with the hashtag #WhoIsP49, while Reddit's r/technology thread exploded with theories. Anonymous posters claimed insider knowledge. Some speculated it was an ex-CTO. Others guessed a disgruntled lab tech. One thread hit closer to the truth than I was comfortable with. They dug up my old university thesis on diagnostic biosensors and began piecing together a timeline that pointed squarely at me. I didn't panic. Instead, I leaned into the momentum. I created a second release, this time a video. No face, just my voice, altered slightly, narrating a timeline from idea conception to prototype, overlaid with screen recordings of lab logs, firmware build histories, even footage of me soldering the prototype while explaining its function in technical detail. Not too complex, but technical enough to shut down any claim of fabrication. It ended with a single slide. Truth isn't what you say loudest. It's what survives pressure. P49. By that afternoon, Miles was trending not for innovation, but for corporate theft. Articles with titles like The Real Inventor Behind the Health Scan Chip and P49 Exposes Health Tech's Dark Side started flooding media outlets. TechCrunch ran a scathing piece dissecting the leak and validating the server metadata. CNN's Aaron Burnett referred to the situation as a potential Theranos-level fraud. But none of it compared to what happened inside the company. Ava texted again. Not an apology this time. A plea. David, it's chaos here. Miles is blaming everyone. Legal is threatening us with perjury if we talk to the press. You don't understand. We sign things. I didn't reply. She made her choice. Now she could live with it. By evening, I heard from Noah. He sent one message. You just cracked the ice. The cracks are spreading. He attached a video, shaky, filmed on a phone, of an internal staff meeting. A group of engineers gathered around their team lead, who was visibly shaken. If any of you have files or notes about who really developed the chip, he said, now is the time to speak up. Legal's running scared. There's a shift coming. That night, I moved motels again. Left no trace behind. But as I checked into the new place, a dim little spot near Round Rock with a blinking vacancy sign, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Momentum. I wasn't just hiding anymore. I was pushing, and the machine that tried to erase me was beginning to crack. This wasn't the end. It was the end of the beginning. For a company like Health Tech, appearances were everything. Glass-walled conference rooms, motivational quotes etched into metal plaques, quarterly highlight reels set to upbeat music. But under that polished facade, I knew what was coming. Collapse never arrives as thunder. It starts as whispers, and those whispers had started to reach me. Emails came in, encrypted, cautious, and full of fear. Junior developers, ex-lab assistants, even a marketing intern who once helped edit internal pitch decks, all telling their own version of the same story. Erased credit, reworded patents, NDA threats, projects reassigned to higher-ups after breakthroughs. Health Tech wasn't just a single betrayal. It was a culture of theft. One message stood out. It came from a name I hadn't seen in years. Trent Maddox. He and I had interned together back in grad school, racing through 2 a.m. debugging sessions and burning through pizza like college kids do. He'd gone the corporate route early, climbing the ranks inside Health Tech's product department. I hadn't spoken to him in ages. Until now. David, I saw your files. I knew it had to be you. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. What they did was wrong, but I have something you might need. Meet me. No phones. 9 p.m. tonight. Parking level 3 at the domain. Come alone. I stared at the screen. Paranoia had become second nature, but I trusted Trent enough to know he wouldn't risk sending that message lightly. So I went. Level 3 of the parking structure was mostly empty. Just the hum of overhead lights and the distant roar of I-35 cutting through the night. He stepped out a nondescript gray sedan, wearing a hoodie, ball cap low. Still hates suits, huh? He said, half smiling. Still allergic? I replied. He reached into his coat and handed me a thumb drive. Miles thinks he's deleted everything, but corporate servers keep mirrored backups for compliance. This was on a buried archive I wasn't supposed to access. Inside were full internal planning documents, budget allocations, product roadmaps, marketing strategy timelines, all pointing to a deliberate strategy to claim public ownership of the chip 6 weeks before my termination. Miles hadn't stolen my idea impulsively. It had been plotted. I looked up. Why help me now? Trent shrugged, eyes tired. Because I've been complicit too long. And because what you made, it deserves better. That night, I didn't sleep. I uploaded the documents to a secure backup and began drafting the second wave of releases. But it wasn't just about burning Miles down anymore. It was about exposing the system that enabled him. The next morning, as I sat in yet another temporary apartment, a tiny Airbnb in South Lamar rented under a friend's name, I received a call through Signal. The voice was unmistakably female. Calm, confident. My name is Isa Vega, she said. You don't know me, but I was on Health Tech's board until Miles pushed me out for questioning his ethics. I've been following what you've done. I stayed silent. She continued. Only the true creator could know the things you've exposed. It's clear now. You're not just a disgruntled ex-employee. You're the mind behind the chip. I let out a slow breath. What do you want? To help you finish this, she said, and to build something better. You have the credibility now. The public is listening, and I have capital. More than enough to fund a new company, one with integrity. My instincts screamed trap, but something in her voice held weight. She didn't ask for anything. She offered, with no guarantees. Meet me, she said. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Barton Springs Park. I'll be wearing a red scarf. She paused before hanging up. Let's take back what was stolen and give it to the world the way it was meant to be. The call ended. I stared at the blank screen. Was it possible? To not just win, but rebuild? I stood, crossed the room, and stared out the window toward the Austin skyline. Miles had taken everything. My work, my name, my peace of mind. But in trying to erase me, he'd created something more powerful. He'd created momentum. He'd created Phoenix 49. And now, Phoenix wasn't alone. Barton Springs Park was unusually quiet for a Friday. The Texas sun filtered through the tall pecan trees, casting long shadows over the stone walkways and trimmed grass. Joggers passed. A couple of kids tossed a frisbee in the distance. But my focus narrowed to a single figure sitting calmly near the water's edge, a woman in a tailored burgundy coat with a red silk scarf knotted neatly around her neck. She didn't turn as I approached, didn't flinch, just looked out over the water like she had all the time in the world. You're early, she said. I like to see who arrives first, I replied. She turned then, her eyes sharp, assessing but not unkind. Isa Vega didn't look like someone who'd been forced out of a billion-dollar boardroom. She looked like someone who had survived it and walked away stronger. I've been following everything, she said, motioning to the bench beside her. You started something you can't stop. You know that, right? Saturday, that's the idea. She nodded approvingly. I reviewed the leaks, the timestamp metadata, the firmware comparisons. It's airtight, and more importantly, it's authentic. The world believes you. You just haven't shown your face yet. That was intentional. I get it, she said, but we're past the point of hiding. The public needs a person, a name, a voice. Her gaze didn't waver. They need you. We sat in silence for a moment as wind stirred the water. I was quiet, not because I disagreed, but because I knew she was right. The world doesn't need another press statement, I finally said. It needs something undeniable. That's why I've already booked the studio, she said with a faint smile. Live interview, prime time, national syndication. Your face, your story, your proof, everything. One shot to take your name back. She handed me a leather folder. Inside was a draft press release. At the top, Monroe Medical Technologies, built on truth. I looked up. Monroe. Your name, she said simply. It's time the world remembers it. That night, I paced my motel room, my nerves running on a loop. I rehearsed the story I'd already lived 1,000 times. The late nights in the lab, the line of code that changed everything, the betrayal that turned my invention into a commodity, and the spark that made me fight back. But when the red light on the studio camera blinked to life the next morning, everything went still. For once, I didn't feel fear. I felt clarity. Today, we're joined by a man known online only as Phoenix 49. The host began, smiling at the camera. But today, for the first time, he's revealing his true identity, the real inventor of the HealthScan chip. David Monroe, thank you for joining us. I looked directly into the camera lens, as if it were Miles himself sitting across from me. My name is David Monroe, I said, and Miles Brandon stole my work. Over the next 30 minutes, I laid it all bare. The design documents, the time-stamped video of my first prototype, the internal emails, the firmware authentication protocol that shut down every chip on day 31, the police report no one filed, the break-in caught on camera, and the system designed to silence innovators like me. I didn't want to hurt patients, I said. That's why I built the chips with a fail-safe to stop functioning if tampered with. It wasn't sabotage. It was self-defense. The chips never gave false readings. They just went dark until the real inventor could be heard. The host leaned in. And what do you say to those who call this revenge? I didn't blink. I call it truth. And truth has consequences. By the time the interview ended, my phone was buzzing nonstop. My real name, David Monroe, was trending worldwide. Justice for Monroe reached over 2 million mentions within hours. Miles's office released a rushed statement calling the claims an orchestrated defamation campaign, but the public wasn't buying it. Not this time. Then came the flood. Former health tech employees began speaking up. On Twitter, on LinkedIn, in open letters and private DMs. Ava's silence broke first. She issued a public apology, admitting her role in the cover-up and urging others to come forward. Tracy, the executive assistant, followed with a long-form Medium post. I was the typist of a lie. She uploaded more voice recordings, meeting memos, calendars with entries like Rebrand Monroe work under Brandon IP. Each revelation was another nail in health tech's coffin. Investors started pulling out. A class action lawsuit was filed within 72 hours by a group of hospitals demanding refunds for defective chips. But the most telling moment came from inside HealthTech's own walls. A resignation email from a senior engineer named Marcy Klein. It was CC'd to over 200 staff and leaked within minutes. I refuse to work for a company that erases the minds it depends on. Today, I walk away, not in shame, but in solidarity. I stand with Monroe. Below was a Dropbox link titled Proof. The link went viral. And by the end of the week, Miles Brandon was no longer CEO. HealthTech's board issued a statement calling for emergency restructuring. Their stock dropped 37% in a single day. Late-night talk shows roasted Miles. Tech blogs called it the biggest ethical collapse since Theranos. But for me, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about what came next. ISA, and I met again. This time in a proper office space downtown, freshly rented and already buzzing with energy. Noah was there, smiling as he scribbled code on a whiteboard. Tracy sat across from him, working on a PR strategy that emphasized transparency and inclusion. Former health tech employees were lining up to join, resumes in hand, not for jobs, but for purpose. We're not just launching a company, I told the team. We're building a movement, one where ideas matter more than titles, and credit goes to the minds who earn it. And that's exactly what we did. We called it Monroe Medical Technologies, not because I wanted my name on a building, but because names mattered. Miles had tried to erase mine from the record, to rewrite history and stamp his initials over my life's work. Using my name for the company was a reclamation, not of ego, but of truth. The launch event took place in an old university auditorium we rented in downtown Austin. It wasn't flashy, no laser lights, no champagne fountains, just glass walls, sunlight, and a room full of people who believed in rebuilding something better. Doctors, researchers, investors, former health tech employees who had resigned en masse. The air buzzed with a kind of cautious optimism I hadn't felt in years. I stepped up to the podium, adjusted the mic, and looked out at the crowd. Thank you, I began. Thank you for being here, not to celebrate one man, but to witness the return of something we've lost in this industry for too long, integrity. Slides flash behind me. Not graphs, not stock prices, just simple, clean breakdowns of how the Monroe chip worked, how it detected cellular anomalies through skin contact, how it protected data privacy, and how we'd improved it. More sensitive biomarker recognition, better battery efficiency, a design that didn't just look sleek, it worked with the human body, not against it. And the biggest reveal of all, we had cut production costs by 40% through smarter component sourcing and redesign. I paused before the final slide. Our goal, I said, is not to sell a product. It's to redefine early diagnostics, to make this technology accessible not just to elite hospitals, but to community clinics, school nurse offices, and mobile outreach programs in rural towns. Because early detection should be a human right, not a privilege. The room erupted into applause. But the real victory came after the presentation, when a line of investors and healthcare administrators approached not with demands, but with curiosity. They didn't just ask about profit margins. They asked about rollout strategies in underserved communities, about patent sharing programs, about training modules for med techs without PhDs. People weren't just buying a chip. They were buying into a vision. By the end of the day, our first funding round was oversubscribed. ISA handled the financials with the grace of someone who'd once negotiated multi-million-dollar deals before lunch. Tracy scheduled follow-up interviews with every major outlet. And Noah? He just kept building. That's who he was. That's who we all were, finally, doing the work without fear of being erased. We set up shop in a renovated floor of a co-working space overlooking Lady Bird Lake. The team grew fast. Engineers from MIT, data scientists from Stanford, young coders from UT who'd followed the Phoenix 49 saga like it was modern myth. They didn't come for salaries. They came for purpose. Etched into the glass wall, separating our lab from the rest of the office were the words that became our motto. You can steal my ideas, but you can't replicate my mind. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was revolution. The Monroe chip entered its beta phase within 3 months. We partnered with 5 major hospital networks to pilot the technology in real-world conditions. Preliminary reports were staggering. A 220% increase in early detection rates for conditions ranging from autoimmune diseases to early-stage cancers. Patients cried in waiting rooms. Doctors emailed us directly. One nurse sent a video message of a boy whose leukemia had been flagged 6 months earlier than traditional tests would have caught it. The message ended with a quiet, trembling thank you. It wrecked me in the best way possible. We launched publicly that summer. No pyrotechnics, no gimmicks, just a simple stage, a live demo, and the most beautiful 3-word headline to ever grace the New York Times. It actually works. While other companies scrambled to recover from cybersecurity breaches and public backlash, we opened our code, parts of it, to peer review. We implemented rolling audits. We created an open forum where team members could anonymously flag concerns. Because transparency wasn't just a slogan, it was policy. Miles, by then, had vanished from the public eye. The last anyone had seen of him, he was photographed in Zurich, looking thinner, quieter, wearing sunglasses inside a coffee shop. Some said he was writing a book. Others claimed he was trying to launch a startup under a different name. But none of that mattered. He was a footnote. I was the story now. Or more precisely, we were. A year to the day after that first press conference where he stole the spotlight, we held our first all-hands town hall. 60 employees filled the room. A mosaic of faces, races, genders, disciplines, but with one thing in common. Every person had been given the credit they deserved from the first draft to the final design. I stood at the front and said the only thing that truly mattered. We didn't get here because we fought back. We got here because we chose to build forward. And the team clapped. Not because they had to, but because they believed it. Out the corner of my eye, I saw Ava standing quietly near the exit. She hadn't joined the company. She never asked to. But she'd come that day, maybe looking for closure. Maybe looking for forgiveness. I nodded to her. Just once. It was enough. We weren't all meant to walk the same path. But we all had the right to choose our direction. The war was over. But the future? That was just getting started. It was early morning when I walked into the glass-walled lab at Monroe Medical HQ. The city outside was still quiet, lights of downtown Austin blinking softly as the sun prepared to rise. My footsteps echoed against the polished floor. The space was nearly empty, just a few early risers already hunched over microscopes or sipping coffee beside lines of code. I didn't come in this early for meetings anymore. Those were for the team now, young, brilliant, relentless. My role had shifted, not gone, just evolved. On the wall near the entrance hung a frame, not gilded, not ostentatious. Just a photo, me at a soldering bench, glasses crooked, hair messy, mid-sentence explaining how a neural pattern recognition sequence could predict abnormalities in human tissue. Underneath it, one simple line etched into brass. Built, not stolen. I didn't want a statue. I didn't need awards. But that photo, that moment, captured everything. Because legacy, I'd come to learn, isn't about recognition. It's about the ripple you leave in others, and how they think, how they act, how they refuse to let the world tell them they're disposable. There was a time when I believed ideas were enough. That brilliance alone could shield you. But it doesn't. The world doesn't just reward truth. It often punishes it first. And if you're not ready, if you don't defend it, if you don't defend yourself, it can be taken, twisted, sold off with someone else's signature on the patent. But what they can't steal is your mind. What they can't silence is your persistence. Because real creators, the kind who don't chase the spotlight, but chase progress, they don't disappear. They rise again. Sometimes in new companies. Sometimes in new ideas. Sometimes, like me, in code hidden inside chips that no one knows how to break. The Monroe chip was in over 2,000 hospitals now. Our pediatric version had just been FDA approved. Clinics in rural Kansas, Mississippi, and Navajo Nation used them daily. ISA handled expansion into Latin America. NOAA was building a new AI diagnostic assistant to pair with the chip. Tracy now ran an internal ethics board that had the authority to overrule even my decisions. And me? I spent my days mentoring, not formally. No lectures or nameplates. Just one engineer at a time. I'd walk up to their desk, ask what they were building. I'd challenge their logic. I'd ask why they chose a certain structure or why that data set mattered. I never offered answers, just questions. The right questions had always changed everything for me. Now I passed them on. One afternoon, I sat with a junior dev named Lena. She had just joined from a university program that partnered with underserved communities. She was nervous around me at first, called me Mr. Monroe 3 times before I smiled and said, "David's fine." She showed me a new sensor patch idea, smaller than a dime, able to scan glucose levels through sweat, no needle required. She was fidgety, unsure, halfway apologizing as she explained it. I leaned forward, listened fully, and then said, "You know this could save tens of thousands of lives a year, right?" Her face lit up. It was the same kind of smile I used to wear. Before the erasure, before the theft, before the fire. That night, I stayed late in the lab. Not because I had to, just because I could. I walked past each desk, remembered every step that led here. The betrayal, the stolen credit, the threats, the quiet rage, the digital chessboard I built from a motel room, and the moment I stepped into the light and said, "My name is David Monroe," and was heard. I opened my journal. Not a blog, not a LinkedIn post, just a worn black notebook I kept with me. I turned to the final page and wrote the last line I needed to say, not to the world, but to myself. They tried to write me out. I rewrote the story. Then I closed the notebook and walked to the lab window as dawn broke across the Texas skyline. Tomorrow, someone new would step into this building with a dream. And this time, no one would take it from them. Because I was here. Because we were here. And because legacy, real legacy, is the space you create for others to rise. If this story moved you, if you've ever had something taken from you, your credit, your voice, your idea, then don't stay silent. Share the story. Stand up for the builders, the thinkers, the quiet minds behind the breakthroughs. And if you're one of them, don't give up. Don't let them define your legacy. Write your own. Subscribe for more stories that matter. Turn your scars into strength. Tell us your story in the comments, because you might be the next name the world needs to remember.